Grace Talks 2021. It's a Thursday. Let's see if I still know how to do this. Turn up the music here. Great day, great year to be alive. It's been about 6 months. But I'm back. That never gets old. Enjoying life and glad to be alive. A lot going on since the last time we had a Grace Talks. We did do a bonus episode recently, and we skirted through all the things that happened in 2020. Tough year for many people. For the nation, been a weird time. But at the same time, I've seen God's blessing and his hand upon my life, on my family's life. Ever since March, we've been quoting and reading. Every day we read Psalms 91, where he says, "No evil shall befall me and no plague shall come nigh our dwelling place." And something that's really been just a confession or a belief in ours that God would sustain us even through that time. And I'm so thankful that he has. And not only that, if you're listening today, he sustained you as well. And so there's things to be certainly thankful about. And not only that, we're here. We're alive. And a lot of things that have gone on in the last year, last 6 months, 7 months, especially since the last time I've talked to you, is a lot of people have struggled through and not made it through. And we're so thankful that God's been a blessing to us. New season, so I just wanted to talk to you. I'm going to have some interviews coming up next week. Matter of fact, next week I have a good friend of mine, David Lamar, who wrote a book called How to Cripple Anxiety, and I hope you listen to the chat that I have with him. That'll also be available on video as well. So we did that one that you could see audio and video. It's the first video or live stream that we've done for Grace Talks that we've ever done. And so we'll be releasing that next week, our conversation with David. We will also have hopefully more conversations like that with people that are interesting to talk to and so forth. And not only that, we have our grace prayers also coming back. And so we'll be praying with you, maybe not 3 times a week like we did when we were doing it, but maybe once or twice a week. We'll be coming back with grace prayers in the coming weeks as well. And I'm thankful and I'm glad to be doing that again. Grace prayers is really, really called on. A lot of people all over the world. I'm just looking at the listenership, and I'm seeing from Australia and from New Zealand and from Austria and from Italy and all over the world, people are listening to our prayers on Grace Prayers. And so I hope that's been a blessing to you, because certainly if there's no season that we ought to pray, it's the season that we ought to be, this is time that we ought to be praying right now. So I hope you check out Grace Prayers as well. I just wanted to come on today and just kind of have a conversation and kind of think through what has been going on. I mean, how many times do we say this? I mean, you have to be living on under a rock to not really experience or to know what is going on in our society, especially in our country right now. And I've really been thinking through this a whole lot, especially when it comes to particularly the attacks on the Capitol, or the invasion on the Capitol building, in regards to also our president. Sorry about that. Our president of the United States. And there's still people that are really prone to say that he's going to, there's still people that I know that say that he'll be in office for the next 4 years. And we will see that. Only time will tell, right? But certainly doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I was talking to my church this last Sunday, particularly about where we are, and I was just asking them the question of do we have soul? Jesus says in the Gospels that what profit a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul? His soul. The soul can be defined as the immaterial essence of man, that inward value of life. The soul. The mind, even. The mind, will, and the emotions that make up the soul. And so I remember a preacher asking once, is it possible to lose your soul and be alive? Because many times when we think about the losing of the soul, we think of it as kind of a last days or kind of end time prophecy. If you go to hell, you've lost your soul. That means that you've been damned in a sense. But it also could mean that there's a modern day or a current day life judgment as well when we think about the soul. When we think about the soul, the heart, the energy, even so much it can be defined as the inward courage, that which rises up in a person or a person's personality that gives them the stamina to even endure or even to combat things in the earth. And it really would speak to me to ask the church, particularly my church, have we lost our soul? Are we trying to gain the whole world, our possessions, or even the ease of life? Or have we turned our back on the things that we should have in our value system that we should fight for? And I've really been wrestling with this, and I think it's prudent that we all do this right now, even more than we have before. I mean, I keep talking about the idea of having values and principles and how we stand with these values and principles. And there is an age right now that these value systems, our value system, our principles have been tested. They really, really have been tested. What do you believe? What do you believe about justice? What it seemingly like injustice is going on in the earth? I mean, will you just say, man, eye for an eye, we'll let OJ get away with the murder, even though we know he did it just because, there has been a problem in the criminal justice system and there's people that are serving time that shouldn't be serving time. So I'm going to vote for this guy, or I'm going to stand on his behalf just because he represents the culture or the people group that I'm a part of. Or will we say, I'm going to stand for whatever I believe and whatever I think is right, no matter, even if it goes against the people group or the people that I align myself with? I remember talking to somebody once, and we were just talking about politics, and they were really a big Trump guy. They just really liked Trump. And I'm not saying that there wasn't any merit to their arguments of why they liked Trump. Of course, some people would hear that and say, well, there's no merit to liking Trump at all. But they really were strong, and they really thought that if you were a Christian, you should be voting for Trump. And it wasn't necessarily because of Trump, but it was based upon what they felt like the other side was doing, the Democrats were doing. And I basically remember telling them, listen, I couldn't at the time, 2016, I could not vote for Trump based upon what I had seen. And if I didn't want the guy to be a principal at my daughter's school, then I certainly didn't want him to be the president of the United States. And I've talked about this on the show quite some often about my even my disdains for Donald Trump at that point. And we've seen some of the things that he's done. We've covered it on this show, policies that we would say, man, that's really good, the way that he's handled certain things. We've said, man, we appreciate those things. But there's always, I think one commentator says good Trump and bad Trump. There's kind of this line, all right, that was good, this is bad. And I think a person that is called to be a person that stands for principles and values, one of their principles is just telling the truth, or the truth as they know it to be. Calling it down the middle as fairly or as much as you possibly can, which is a really difficult thing to do in itself, to be able to call something right down the middle in itself. Because we all have our lines that are blurred based upon our experiences. Many of us see things based upon our own experiences, our own losses, our own things like that, I bring this up all the time, and it's the song by R. Kelly, and I'm sure that it's quite it's quite probably unpopular to say anything about R. Kelly at this moment. But he said it like this: one man can make one woman hate all men. Basically meaning that one negative experience can dictate how we see other experiences that move forward in our life. We don't like something because of an experience that we had in our life. Even if that something might be good or bad or whatever the case is, we judge those things that way. So we've talked about tribalism in that way. Many people are tribal based upon their own circumstances, how they've been treated or whatever the case is, that many people just say, I'm going to stay with this side because of whatever it is. Maybe you're strong on the pro-life end like I am, and you make your decisions based upon your affiliation with the pro-life movement, and you demonize everything else that's against that movement and so forth. I would say you still can be for those movements or whatever those things is. But I think one of the things that we're seeing right now that is really being spotlight on the church and not only the church, but I hope people are seeing this as Democrats and Republicans alike, that we are learning that it is very important to speak clearly what our principles and our values are. It may be just as important, as to speaking what our principles and our values are, just as important to say what our principles and our values are not. And I really think that's the big thing that I think is really being seen, especially in this last week. I mean, I've just seen how just watching, and I haven't been watching very hard. Purposely, I've been turning away from many of these things. But I've seen how the church, particularly, would stand even in the last couple of weeks. Oh, Donald Trump, this election has been taken from him. This election has been robbed from him. And let me just say this on the election thing too. There are some things that raise questions for me in the election. I'm not saying that the election has been stolen from him, but I think every American and most Americans want our elections to be fair and right. We know that. Because some of the same people in Atlanta, Georgia, or excuse me, not in Atlanta, Georgia, but in Georgia completely, were saying the same things about Stacey Abrams a couple of years ago. Like, was the election stolen from her? And whether it was or if it wasn't, or if she's a legitimate governor of Georgia or not, we should want our elections to be fair and elections to be right and not stolen from us, whether it's Russia or whatever the case is. And I think that's an interesting position, too, as I kind of go off here just a minute. But they tried to impeach Trump for almost 2 years based upon the interference that they believe happened with Russia in the election. But it's so interesting when he is saying that there's some kind of improper behavior in the elections, that the response, especially on Facebook and some of these, that elections are hardly, if ever, tampered with. You can read that right on Facebook. They're like, elections are hardly ever meddled in. There's hardly ever, or there's hardly ever any election fraud. And I'm thinking, well, is there election fraud, or is there not election fraud, or is there only election fraud when there's somebody that we like that didn't win the election? And I'm thinking there has to be a balance to this argument. Like, one balance could be, it doesn't matter who the person is that wins the election or not. We should make sure that our system is not broken or contaminated or not rigged. Period. But we also, at the same time, like, I also told people when Donald Trump lost the election, or when it seemed like he lost the election, and obviously they have certified the votes, and so we have a new president that will be inaugurated next week. And so when you can't say, well, they were wrong for saying that Donald Trump was not their president, they're whiny, and they're looking at snowflakes whining, and you do the exact same thing when your guy doesn't win. I think it's very important that the church right now define clearly who we are, what our beliefs are. And we don't wrap our ideology up in a man or even in a party, but we find it in Christ and in the Bible. That we say, this is what we believe, and the reason we believe this is because this is what the book says, and you can't know what the book says if you don't read the book yourself. And let me just tell you that it is needed now in this age, in this season. And let me just say this as well. I know we say a lot of things, a lot of words, a lot of hyperbole when we get to talking about the age in which we're about to participate in, as if the age that we weren't in didn't need the same kind of energy. It's like saying, we need to pray more now than ever. It's like, well, we should have been praying more then than ever back last year as well. So I know that we oftentimes make the next thing the most important thing. This is the biggest election in the history of our country. This is the biggest event in the history of our country. This is the worst time in the history of our country. It's going to be the worst season in our country's history. Like, I know we like to do that, but the truth of the matter is some of these principles and some of these things that we stand on, we should have stood on yesterday as well. And I really think that's the result of where we are right now. Is the church or people of God have really lost the intensity